Hello, it's Bart from NatureManufacture. This time I will show you our cost and use environment, which is designed for Unreal Engine 5. I will show you some tips how to play with this pack and its features. Of course, I will show you how to import it properly without any issues. And yeah, I will maybe build something with these splines to show you how flexible photoscanned cliffs on Unreal Engine landscape splines are. So first of all, when you import this asset, you have to remember that you need to turn on water plugin. Why? Because of this water body. If you don't need this water body, you don't have to turn this on. Simply it will be empty space. If you have a own water system, so then you don't have to do this. Another step is that if you will use this water body, after you enable the plugin, you have to turn on distance field generation, mesh generation. So this checkbox have to be turned on, generate mesh field. And it's not only for the water body, but it is also for blending between landscape and 3D models. You may notice that at the moment this blending is turned off, even if the checkbox is turned on, because you will have to turn this option in every material that you want to be blended with landscape. Because, for example, you don't need this at every material. It always costs some frame rates. So let me turn on this on every material now. So basically mostly on cliffs, because they are blended with landscape. Let's turn this on. And there's 3 other materials that possibly work with this very well. You see that the cliff objects are blended now nicely, but there is also kind of mesh that should be blended with landscape too. It's the clay mesh and the rocks mesh. You will find them in details, and these 2 materials should be blended as well. They look much better now. Of course, you could also blend this poles as well, like we did on the screenshots. To do this, you will simply go to the fence materials, and in poles, you just turn blending on. Okay, so what else? You could generate this kind of cliffs in very easy way. It's super simple. Let's maybe make such a spline cliff as an example. So you go to the landscape, to manage and splines. With control, you place first point. Let's change the width to 400, so it will be a bit smaller. With control, we place rest points. And what we do now? In segments, we click. We have to add the meshes to the spline, and this is spline meshes. We just click plus. And in cliff folder, you have landscape spline meshes and meshes. Meshes are normal cliff meshes, which probably they are suitable for any other spline system, but landscape spline meshes we adjust a bit to eliminate all gaps between meshes, because it seems that landscape spline boundaries are not accurate enough, and we have to adjust the boundary of the mesh, each mesh, so the gaps will disappear. This problem will not be probably visible in any other spline system that you have. So for any other spline system, use meshes. For landscape spline meshes that Unreal provide in the landscape system, use landscape spline meshes. And okay, let's now drag and drop the mesh. And now, if you will going to use more than one mesh on the spline, so you want to randomize the mesh, you have to remember about one thing. Let me add more meshes to show you the problem. Let's add some meshes. Okay. And you will see that they are disconnected. It's because of the center horizontally checkbox. Let's turn them off. And now meshes are distributed and connected properly. What you could do always is to adjust position. You may notice that blending works automatically as we use distance field mesh that we turn it on in last step. You could rotate this mesh, you could change its size, and what else we could do with that. You may notice that at our splines that we have on the landscape, there is a different spline, different mesh for the first part of the spline. And you could easily adjust that yourself. Simply check this spline part, this specific first object on the spline. In segments, simply kick the spline meshes. You have to remember that to do this on the first object. And you could drag and drop left or right ending. It depends if you want to put beginning or the end of the mesh. So, and now remember always about center horizontally. And now you have a beginning of the spline as we design and use in our demo. What you could do with this landscape spline, for example, you could, if you click any of this mesh, or click on any of this mesh, you could adjust its shape a bit, right? So when you have a kind of sharp angle on the with the cliffs, you could adjust them a bit so they will not intersect. Of course, you could always change the seed on every part of the spline, so every Unreal Engine spline feature will work with them. Okay, the same thing you could make with our fence objects. I mean these poles and ropes, and it have the same problems at the beginning or ending of the mesh. So you have to remember that at the end you have to place and right or left mesh, right? So you have on the segments you have a segment meshes, the span meshes, and at the end you replace the mesh with the ending mesh. So yeah, this is how we build the whole scene, all these splines. Let's maybe now turn on the Nanite. To enable Nanite on the landscape, you have to, first of all, enable Nanite in your project. The second thing is that normal shadow maps doesn't work well with Nanite. For the Nanite, there is a shadow which called virtual shadow maps. You have to change this to support Nanite. And next, it's a good tip, but you don't have to do this. You could turn off allow static lighting, because if you will going to use Nanite, simply you will not have any static lighting. So you could turn this off. Okay, so now we have virtual shadows and Nanite turn it on the project. The next step is going to the landscape object and turn on enable Nanite. And then you will have to click build data. As our shader support Nanite by default, you will get nice Nanite mesh out of the box. I hope you see all these details. It's good habit to move a bit light at your scene, so it will refresh shadows to avoid this kind of issues. Let's maybe change it, and we could move it back again to 49. And now you have a Nanite mesh, no shadow issues, and a nice landscape with very detailed rendering, right? To be honest, I really like how it render. It's pretty expensive. It will cut some frames at your project, but I feel like it's worth. I think the best visual effect, I mean, you see the Nanite power. Of course, when you look on the landscape, you see all this depth, but if the light angle is pretty low, let's maybe set it to -2, you see that all the shadows, which comes from the geometry, not from the normal maps, appear on the landscape, are super cool. You have to remember that if you bump the VEDs, sometimes there is no space, there is no enough data to handle every angle of the mesh, so you may get some stretches. You could, of course, reduce the depth of the displacement to fix that, but to be honest, you will have to be really close to see that. From the normal angles and normal distance, result is invisible, right? So yeah, and the cool thing is that all this Nanite texturing and rendering works with our high blended landscape material. So yeah, this is how to enable Nanite. Play with it yourself, and let's maybe move to tutorial about the reverse splines and blending between landscape and meshes. Another feature that we built is river blueprint. So you have to visit water splines folder, you drag and drop blueprint for the river. Let's maybe rotate it. You have to choose river high poly or low poly mesh. For example, for the start, you could use low poly mesh. In materials, you choose river. And let's maybe do one more thing. If we have a spline, let's increase the mesh size to 10. Yep. Let's add some river on meshes by simply moving the points. It will start to spawn mesh between points. And what we do now is, for example, let's add another point by holding Alt. If you start to move mesh, it will start to add the points. And you will see that our system automatically generates waterfalls on the angles. Yeah, you could adjust that as you want. You could rotate it, bend it. Let's maybe replace it now with, the mesh by high poly mesh. You will see there is a vertex offset on the river. If you use high poly mesh for your setup, it could be a bit slow, simply because as there is no tessellation on the Unreal 5, you have to use a vertex offset, and that's why we create mesh which have a big amount of triangles, but on LOD we cut all these triangles. And if you use this mesh and generate this river, it could be a bit slow because it have to recalculate all these triangles. So it's good to use simpler mesh, and at the end simply replace the mesh on the spline. Yeah. So we have a detailed. Of course, you could also use a low poly mesh for the river. You don't have to use this high poly, but you will not have a nice vertex offset. Okay, so one more thing left. Okay, so I told you that you could blend the 3D meshes with the landscape. I told you that you have to enable generate mesh distance fields. But if you have your own landscape and own materials and own meshes, I will give you tips how to enable this with our materials and shading. First of all, you have to create two textures which called virtual textures, runtime virtual textures. Let's maybe duplicate this one. The first, let's call base color. The second, high. And base color need base color normal roughness specular setup. The height have to be world height because system must know when and where it should blend landscape with 3D meshes, and simply this height texture will give you the place where the mesh touches the landscape, and base color will give you color of the blending. Okay, the second thing is to have a material on the landscape that support virtual textures. And these two nodes are in our material the terrain shader by default, but if you have own terrain shader, you have to add them, right? Virtual texture outputs. Okay. The next step is to add these virtual textures to our landscape, and in virtual texture panel, simply you add two textures and drag and drop them. After you click create volumes, it will generate two objects at your outline on the map, and you have to choose landscape and click set bounds for both, right? So now system generate two textures. One is the height of the landscape, the second is the base color of the landscape. So with these two textures, if we drag them into the material that we provide, and this material have enabled to use LVT blend, if you will drag and drop these textures here, you will see that it starts to blend with the landscape. Right? If I will restart these values, it will stop. So that's the whole thing that you have to do for your own landscape, your own map, right? If you want to use that feature. Okay, so I feel like it's everything for this tutorial. Give us in if you like this pack, and just maybe share some your own maps with these assets. And yeah, see you.